Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is James Maskell, and I have the distinct pleasure of being today with Dr. David Katz. Now, Dr. David Katz is probably familiar to a lot of you for different reasons, and if we were going to, I was going to give Dr. Katz's full bio, we'd probably have to be here. Actually, it might take up the majority of the interview today because Dr. Katz has been on a mission in preventative health for, it seems like decades. Dr. Katz has his degree initially from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, his Masters of Public Health from Yale, and is board certified in preventative medicine. He's the editor and internal medicine. He's the editor-in-chief of childhood obesity and involved with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, president to a number of nonprofits, also introduced and is the principal inventor of the NuVal nutritional guidance system, which you've probably seen in your local supermarket, has published nearly 200 scientific articles, and is now working in New Haven, Connecticut at the Griffin Hospital with their internal and preventative medicine program, and has been, all over TV, ABC News, New York Times. So you probably should have heard of Dr. David Katz, and if you haven't, then I'm glad that I'm bringing you him today. Dr. Katz, this is a bio of a man on a mission to change health in America. What is the driving force of the passion that keeps you moving forward today to do all of these things and to be on an event like this?
Well, James, thanks for the kind introduction. It's pretty obvious. I'm a person, and whatever we do professionally, we're all people. We all feel the same things. We all have the same kinds of hopes and aspirations for ourselves and the people we love. And in my world of preventive medicine, I know very well that we have the capacity, if we turned what we already know into what we routinely do, to eliminate just about 80% of all of the chronic disease in the world. So that's heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia. And I've got skin in the game. I think about the people I love who have been affected by those conditions. And then I think about the friends who have people they love affected by those conditions. And I can't help but be a human being first and just think about the loss, the sadness, the anguish that we all get caught up in that doesn't need to happen 8 times in 10. Now, if you're not inspired by something like that, I'm not sure what would inspire you. So there's this incredible opportunity to improve the human condition, for many of us to simply have better lives, less sadness, less loss, less anguish, more years in life, more life in years, to have that for ourselves and to have that for the people we love. And so I look out and see that opportunity, and knowing that it's potentially within reach just inspires me every day to keep trying to get us there.
Absolutely. And I know, as well as the books and everything that you're doing in America, you've also been very active on the internet, things like LinkedIn. It seems like, this is the spread of this chronic disease has almost started in America and is actually moving out to other countries now. So how important is it for us to start to communicate some of these best practices outwards as well?
This is a global issue for sure, James, and it may very well be that we here in the U.S. can be proud of being the epicenter of the mess that modern epidemiology has become. But we've been very effective at exporting it, and it's particularly tragic because there's a study called the Blue Zones that looks all around the world at the populations that live the longest, have the least chronic disease, tend to be the happiest. And instead of importing those lessons to the United States and making that our culture, we export around the world McDonald's and Coca-Cola and help everybody get fat and sick like we are. So absolutely, it's a global issue. In fact, we have information from the World Health Organization that there are more overweight and obese people on the planet than there are hungry people. Now, throughout history, hunger has been an issue, and it still is, but obesity is now a more prevalent issue even than hunger. And despite the fact that we know that culture could be the medium of lifestyle as medicine, again, we're not doing an effective job of learning the lessons from the cultures that get this right. We are overtaking them with all of the problems of modern culture that tend to produce both obesity and chronic disease.
Absolutely. So, I'd like to get into some of those best practices and just start with this for everyone listening. We've called this segment "Disease Proofing Yourself," and that was the name of one of your books. And I'm really glad that there are books that are coming out now with really punchy titles like "How to Disease Proof Yourself" or recently Dr. Bland's "Disease Delusion." These are book titles that really grab people's attention and say, hey, there's something that we could be doing. So what do we learn from those blue zones about disease proofing, and what can we learn from them first and foremost in America?
Well, first of all, thanks about the book. So, Disease Proof is a good title, and my editors at Penguin get the credit for that. They came up with it, although that really is what the book is about, how we could use lifestyle as medicine to immunize ourselves against 80% of all chronic disease, reduce your personal lifetime risk of heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia by 80%, and get similar gains at the population level. But although the title may be punchy here, James, there really is a problem. And Dr. Bland's book may or may not have the same problem. But the problem for me as an author, and having the same hope that every author has to get on the New York Times bestseller list, is that what tends to land you there is a magical promise. So most of the books that are guaranteed to get on the bestseller list tell people, there's just this one effortless thing you need to do, and the next thing you'll lose the weight or find the health, and essentially there's magical pixie dust on page 315. I don't deal in magical pixie dust. Basically, what the blue zones teach us is that you actually have to live well. You actually have to eat well. You have to be active. You have to sleep well and enough. You have to obviously avoid tobacco. You have to manage the stress in your lives. You need strong social bonds. I consider the three predominant influences on health feet, forks, and fingers. And by that I mean physical activity, dietary pattern, and not holding cigarettes. But the next three would be sleep, stress, and love. So I think everybody can take that away from today's discussion. Feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. Get those six right. Be active, eat well, don't smoke, get good sleep, mitigate the stress in your life, and have strong connections to other people. Frankly, everything is vanishingly less important after that. The blue zones get that right. Eating well is just part of those cultures. We're talking about Crete, Okinawa, Seventh-day Adventists in California, other populations around the world. But many of them have plant-based diets. Many of them have Mediterranean diets. They do a lot of walking, so they're physically active. They're not necessarily in the gym pumping iron, but just motion is part of their routine cultural norm. They tend not to smoke, and they tend to have a more leisurely pace to their lives, less stress, and then they have a strong sense of community. So, looking at those examples, the question is, how do we apply that in the context of the crazy lives we tend to lead? And we can, but it's skill dependent. And so my basic argument in disease proof is you need more than just willpower. You need skill power, and skills can be learned. And my mission is to try and teach the ones that I have. I'm an expert in this space. I'm supposed to have those skills. Skills can be shared. Skills can be paid forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you used the word immunize yourself earlier because, traditionally anything to do with health has been something that you would have done to you by a doctor, but this is something that's outside of the sort of the medical industry.
Self-immunization. I think that's a key point, James. If anything, we tend to impart, and of course I am a physician, but I think we tend to impart way too much power to physicians and the so-called healthcare system. The healthcare system is really mostly about treating disease. If we want to talk about building health at its origins, well then frankly each of us needs to be in charge. We do that in the places we live and love and learn and work and pray and play, the places we actually live our lives and spend our time, not in clinics and not in hospitals. And the power over all of that resides not with doctors and not at the cutting edge of biomedical advance, but it's in our own hands. It's really the choices we make every day. And the other thing that's important to note in the mix here, James, is that, well more than a decade into the genomic age now, we know that DNA is not destiny. We've gone looking for the past 10 years to try and identify the genes responsible for heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, all the stuff that tends to affect us. And there is no single gene responsible. It's a whole mix of genes. But what proves to be really important is not the genes you have, but the experience you have in your life that influences the way your genes behave. When we change our behaviors, it affects the behavior of our genes. So while DNA, for the most part, isn't destiny, it turns out to a very large degree, dinner is. The things we do every day influence the behavior of our very genes. So really powerful opportunities for us to be the doctor, to immunize ourselves. And yes, there's a role for medicine, and yes, there's a role for disease treatment, of course. But when it comes to building health, we're the cooks, and it's our kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. And that it sounds like that's a much more empowered situation to be for patients, and patients aren't typically used to being empowered in this relationship. We've had a very sort of patriarchal system, and it's moving towards a system where it's evolving towards a system where the patient is in charge and looks for support from the medical community rather than sort of waiting and being reactive.
Well, I'd like to see more of that, frankly. And again, in the blue zones, and this, people can Google the blue zones, and you'll see the work of Dan Buettner, who wrote a book on this topic and studied these cultures around the world. But you look at the people who live the longest, have the most years in life, who have the least chronic disease, so they have the most life in years. They tend to be the happiest because healthy people have more fun. And and when you go looking for the reasons, they're not saying my doctor's so fantastic, or I get really great clinical counseling. Maybe that's true. And again, I am a physician. I take care of patients. All of that stuff really does matter. But essentially, the answer is culture is the vehicle and lifestyle is the medicine, or culture, if you will, is the spoon. And then it's just the way we live every day. They need doctors a whole lot less. It's not that doctors are treating their diseases so well. It's that they're not getting the diseases in the first place. And that's better. It's just better. So, absolutely, we really want to own this, and we can. And from my perspective, James, there are two ways really to get there from here. One is to change the world. A lot about the modern world is conducive to getting fat and sick. And so we could change the world so that it's more normal to eat well and be active. And everywhere we go, we have only good food choices, and our schedules are a little more hospitable, and we sleep a bit better, and all of that. But we can't just keep waiting on the world to change. So the other option is to change ourselves, to empower ourselves to deal effectively with the world as it is. And again, I have a skill set. I'm a preventive medicine specialist. It's my job to know how to be healthy, and I do my job well. So I know how to be healthy. I eat well no matter what. I'm physically active no matter what. I prioritize feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love, and I'm a beneficiary of it. My health is excellent. My fitness is outstanding. And it's not because I'm a swell guy. It's because I've got a skill set, just like a pilot has a skill set to fly a plane. So those skills can be learned. But one of the critical things, James, and I hope our discussion today helps advance this mission, one of the critical things is we've got to grow up and be serious about health and weight. We have to stop waiting for magical pixie dust to come along. I grow tired of the fascination with the next big fad diet, as if somebody's going to come along with some magical formula to fix everything. We have to take this seriously. We have to give it the respect it deserves, and then the world is ours.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a good point. I'd love to get into some of those dietary things, because it's mainly diet that's seen as the pixie dust, although we can certainly talk about some other things. But I just want to go back to, you said there were two ways to really change the world, and one is to be proactive and one is to wait for the world to change. But I would really say that there's only one way, because the way that the world changes is in response to the changes that we make. Every time you buy a packet of Oreos from the supermarket, the amount of information that goes out from that purchase, i.e. where Oreos should sit on the shelf, to the producers and the people who make the products that go into Oreos, you're sending out price signals with every purchase that you make. So in making those changes for yourself and choosing different foods and choosing different purveyors of foods, moving to farmers markets, buying local, those kind of things, you're actually sending signals into the market that this is what people want, and then the world changes as a result. So it seems to me there's only one way, right? Really.
I think it's an excellent point, and it's one I make often. So, essentially what I was saying, James, is, again, we can change the world or change ourselves, but I completely agree with you. When we change ourselves, it changes the world. And maybe nobody ever said that better than Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, nothing else ever has. So when we make informed food choices, when we vote at the cash register, we are those thoughtful and committed citizens. I completely agree with you. And in fact, I am devoted in my career to both, empowering people so that they can change themselves and overcome the things that make being healthy difficult, but also, to essentially change our collective demand, for example, for better food, and thereby change the supply. A lot of my colleagues work directly on changing the supply. So, they want legislation or they want policy change, and I support a lot of that, things like taxing soda. But I think, the less objectionable way to change the food supply is to change the food demand. So we completely agree. I think if we can empower people to make better choices regarding feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love, and I agree with you, we can focus in particular on diet. When you add up all of those better choices, they come to be a change in the food demand. And the one thing that most effectively changes the food supply is not law and it's not policy. It's trying to keep the customer satisfied. You change the food demand, you very reliably change the food supply. We've seen that happen many times. At the height of the Atkins diet craze, every supermarket in the United States sold low-carb food. They still do, but those low-carb foods predominated. There was no law, there was no lawsuit, there was no policy, there was no requirement. They just knew that shoppers want this, and they put it very prominently on the shelf. Well, we could similarly show that what we want is highly nutritious food, and we won't buy glow-in-the-dark junk, and then they would stop selling glow-in-the-dark junk. The one critical thing for me to add at the end, James, is this. The choices we make are determined in part by the choices we have. And one of the great challenges in changing the demand is that there are forces conspiring against us that are pretty powerful. And just quickly, another book worth mentioning is Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. Michael Moss is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, and what he writes about is how big food companies have hired teams of PhDs to engineer food that is all but addictive, to engineer food that we can't stop eating. And so there are these influences on us that very smart people are conspiring to put on us that affect our behavior. And so, in essence, they're affecting our demand, and then our demand is affecting supply, and it's this circle, and they're sort of in control of it. We've got to break out of that chain if we are to exert the effect we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't we delve into those 6 areas then, because we're going to cover those 6 areas really on this summit, but I'd love to just go deeper into those. So you said the first one is feet. As a physician or as someone who understands this, what are your sort of main recommendations for people to take responsibility for that?
So that refers to physical activity, and I would agree with you. Really, the only controversial one on the list is forks or diet. So we should talk mostly about that. I think most people understand that being active is good and being sedentary not so much. We have more and more evidence that just the amount of time we spend seating every day it is associated with a reduction in life expectancy and quality of life. So it's really just being up and moving is good. Higher levels of physical activity are good up to a point. You can actually over-exercise too. But the key issue for me here is that it's interesting that we seem to need things like pedometers to help us count our steps. And I don't object to that. I think anything that helps us get there from here is good. But I'd note the following, James. You see somebody in a wheelchair, and I think the native human reaction to that is to sort of feel badly and think, gee, I hope maybe it's temporary and they can get up, because it's a good thing to be able to walk and run and jump and dance. And yet, most of us who have perfectly intact legs and can walk and run and jump and dance never do. And so, we think of exercise as oh, woe is me, and I've got to get a pedometer to count my steps. My suggestion is, how about we count our blessings? We have this native animal vitality, this capacity to move in ways that are fun, to do recreational things, whatever it is you like to do, bike or swim or ski or dance. So, I think we have to stop looking at exercise as this onerous thing, recognize that exercise is any way of getting motion into your daily routine, to let this native animal vitality of ours out of its cage, and then to relish its exuberance. We really, we're endowed with this vitality that we tend to neglect until it's completely gone. It just feels good to be in motion. So motion should be part of our daily routine. Now, the other thing I would say is, given our schedules, we have to devise strategies to fit fitness in. And we have a program freely available called ABE for Fitness, Activity Bursts Everywhere. People can just Google ABE for Fitness, or you can post the link for them. And this is a program of brief bursts of physical activity you can do while in your office throughout the day. And we need tools like that. So, whatever your day is like, whether you have time for a hike or not, whether you have time for a walk or not, whether you can get to a gym or not, whatever your day is like, there is a way to fit fitness in. If you're a truck driver and you never get out of your truck, there are ways to do isometric routines while driving the truck. And we have evidence from a recent study that even just those isometric routines, where you tense one group of muscles against another, can be associated with reductions in mean arterial pressure and improve your overall cardiovascular health. So there are ways to get there from here, and we just need to be creative and fit fitness in whatever way it works. And then we need to count our blessings when we have the opportunity to move. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. And you've really teed up one of the other speakers in the summit, Daryl Edwards, who's a friend of mine from the UK, who is talking about the evolution of fitness. And he really says exactly the same thing, is that this should not be something that should be done, in the gym, in certain hour increments. But how do we actually make this, the evolution of fitness is really to engage in it every day as part of our daily life. And, I think, that's so true. Well, I think there's some great starting points there. Let's get into diet now, and I would just say a couple of things about this. Is that it's funny how you said that people have the ability to move and don't. I was speaking to someone yesterday. He was talking about gluten, and they were saying, well, it's in wheat and barley and rye. But he said, but you only really have to care about wheat, because no Americans are eating barley or rye. I thought that was quite funny with regard to your last comment. But look, you've been so right about this fad diet issue, where there's always a new fad, there's always something that's going to get you there quicker. If we learn from the blue zones and we learn from the science, what are the underpinnings of a diet that allows us to mitigate, remove, or reverse chronic disease?
Food, not too much, mostly plants. And I'm quoting Michael Pollan, but that's really the truth. First of all, James, I'm just finishing up now the third edition of my nutrition textbook for healthcare professionals, called Nutrition in Clinical Practice. Now, this is a 500-page comprehensive textbook that has to run the gauntlet of a jury of peers. It's used in medical schools. It's used by physicians in practice and other health professionals. And in the third edition, I think we have something very close to 10,000 scientific citations. And so I have that view from altitude. And then I was recently asked by Annual Review in Public Health, which, as the name suggests, is a peer-reviewed compendium of major topics in public health reviewed once a year. They asked me to write a paper, Can We Say What Diet is Best for Health? And I also recommend that to anyone listening, because the PDF for that paper is freely available to all. You can just download it. So if you type into Google Annual Review in Public Health and go to the journal's homepage, you can find a link to Can We Say What Diet is Best for Health? It's featured on the homepage. So my job there was to review the literature without bias, not to fall in love with any theory about vegan diets or paleo diets or Mediterranean diets, and answer that question. Can we say what diet is best for health? And the answer is yes and no. If what we mean is, can we say what basic theme of eating is best for human health, then absolutely yes. And it's real food, not too much, mostly plants. That's true in all of the cultures and all of the studies. Whether the focus is on low glycemic diets or on high protein diets or low fat diets or plant-based diets or Mediterranean diets or paleo diets, when they work well and improve both weight and health, it's real food, not too much, mostly plants. If the question, however, is can we say what very specific diet in the never-ending beauty pageant is the single best? And can we say that an optimal vegan diet is better for human health than an optimal Mediterranean diet or than an optimal paleo diet? Then the answer is absolutely no, because those studies have never been done. I mean, there's never been a study that has taken neonates and randomly assigned them to be either vegans or paleo eaters for their entire lives and then followed them for 100 years to see who does the best. I mean, for obvious reasons, those studies have not been done, and they're not likely to be done anytime soon. So when you look at the evidence we have, it argues very strongly for a variety of diverse plant foods, and that means vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, with or without whole grains. I'm a strong advocate for whole grains, but you could have a healthy diet and leave them out as long as you're getting plenty of fiber from these other sources, with or without fish and seafood, with or without eggs, with or without dairy, with or without lean meats, but reliably excluding stuff that glows in the dark, reliably excluding highly processed meats, with an emphasis on a healthy array of nutrients, not by focusing on nutrients. The way you get to healthy eating is not to focus on just sugar or just fructose or just sodium or just saturated fat or just omega-6 fat. If you focus on a variety of wholesome foods in reasonable combinations, as all the world's healthy cultures do, all of the nutrients take care of themselves. And the nice thing about this, James, and this is what the research really shows, is that you're immune, again, to use that word, to any serious nutrient problem when you get foods and food patterns right. So, for instance, if you eat a Mediterranean diet, you don't have to focus on avoiding sugar because you're eating mostly foods that don't have added sugar, and it just takes care of itself. Similarly, you don't have to focus on saturated fat because, there's a lot of saturated fat in grain-fed cattle, for example, or if you have a lot of dairy. But you eat a Mediterranean-style diet, and what you tend to get a lot of is monounsaturated fat and a balance of unsaturated fats, including omega-3s. It just happens by virtue of eating the right kinds of foods in the right combinations. And it's incredibly powerful medicine. Study after study after study shows amazing benefits. I mean, you look back, for example, these days there's a lot of negative response to the concept of low-fat eating. But the reality is when low-fat eating didn't mean Snackwell cookies, but it meant a diet of mostly plants, right? The studies show phenomenal things, like the work of Dean Ornish showing the reversal of coronary atherosclerosis and the prevention of heart attacks. So again, the basic theme of healthy eating for Homo sapiens, extremely well established, an incredible volume of research evidence, amazingly consistent, populations all around the world. Which specific diet is best? There is no answer to that, and I think that's a good thing because what it does is give us the opportunity to choose. Do I want to be vegan or not? Do I want a Mediterranean or paleo-style diet? And that gives us the best opportunity to love the food that loves us back because we get to choose the variation on the theme that works best for us and our families. And, frankly, it's that combination, loving the food and having the food love us back, that makes this sustainable because then you get pleasure from eating food you like and pleasure from having health that you like.
It sounds like there's be some serious ongoing placebo benefits to that for everyone as well.
Placebo benefits, you mean from the pleasure of loving the food? Well, I don't know that it's placebo, but yeah, I mean, in essence, I would say that pleasure, first of all, is a source of health because, just being happy and enjoying what you're doing tends to foster health. But the other thing I would say, James, is that the very reason for health, the reason health matters, is because it contributes to enjoyment in life. I mean, it's not like we all ought to be healthy because someone's wagging a finger at us and saying, there's a moral imperative to be healthy. You ought to be healthy because it's the right thing to do. I think at times we kind of get caught up in that. But, when you think about what health is for, I think health is for living. Health is a currency you can spend on having a better life. The more health you have, the more you can invest that in doing the things you love to do and having more enjoyment. So, absolutely, I think the pleasure we get from food needs to be part of the equation. But my wife and I have long argued for loving food that loves you back. I think you can have both. One of the things that can help you get there, if you're not already there, is what I call taste bud rehab. And there's a whole section in Disease Proof on that. And what I mean by that is that taste buds are adaptable little fellas. When you don't let them be with the foods they think they love, they learn to love the foods you're with. So you can learn to get used to more nutritious foods and come to prefer them. And you have to invest in a brief period of transition. But it's really not all that hard to do.
Yeah, I've done that myself, and I've realized that there was a time in my life where I was, for about 6 months after university, I was an investment banker eating a lot of crap. And when I moved to America and started working in the field of alternative medicine in 2005, there was definitely a period of adjustment. And I have to say, I can't drink a Sprite or a Coke now at all. It just tastes absolutely disgusting. Whereas there was a time in my life where that was the nicest thing to drink on the, hungover Sunday morning. And so that's a change in my taste buds. And so now I have an 11-month-old daughter, or she's over a year now actually, and she eats greens and all kinds of things and puts it away all day, and she loves it. So and I've seen a lot of her peers that don't, and I think it's been amazing to know that and then actually sort of allow that to happen for the next generation.
I have 5 children, and I've been through this with all of them, and I've been through it innumerable times with my patients, James. So again, we completely agree. It's very, very powerful. One of the most powerful determinants of dietary preference is familiarity. But what people tend to think is, well, the foods I'm familiar with just are what they are. But that's not true. You can change them. You can get familiar with more nutritious foods. You can rehabilitate your taste buds. And if you shift to foods with less added sugar, less added salt, less added chemicals, you're exactly right. You not only learn to prefer those foods, but you can actually develop aversions to what you used to eat and drink. And I'm with you. I haven't had a soda now in 35 years. As a kid, I didn't know any better. I had them, and they were part of my life. I realized very early, what they were about, that this was sort of a chemistry experiment in a cup, and I wasn't interested. And then after I gave them up for some stretch of months and went back to taste them again, they're just sickeningly sweet. I mean, it's nothing you would want to drink when you're actually thirsty. So that's kind of that. The notion that a soda is a good thing, that is the cultivated taste. I mean, when thirsty, water tends to satisfy beautifully, and we've just corrupted our palates, so we don't even appreciate the beautiful simplicity of water. But you absolutely can get back there, and then you have absolutely no interest in a soda. It's just it's not pleasant.
Exactly. Well, I do want to get into those next 4 issues, but I just want to cover a couple of other things here on food, because part of what we see out there is that there's, like you said, there's people that are trying to find the absolute optimal diet and create, new substitute meats or new, supplements or so forth that are going to sort of replace food altogether. I would imagine from what you said already that you're not a big fan of that concept.
No, I'm not. On the other hand, I also I'm a pragmatist and say we can't make perfect the enemy of good. I think the real solution here is getting to the wholesome foods. But what I am in favor of is doing what it takes to get there from here. Frankly, for some people, the convenience and sort of the engineered satiating properties of meal replacements can be extremely helpful. I think we can devise snacks and food products that can fill gaps in people's days and potentially provide nutrients that raise the quality of their diets. So, again, I think ultimately we would like to be there with real food, direct from nature. But at present, that's out of reach for an awful lot of people, and I think we have to fix that. The other thing we need to do, we can't just talk about improving food choices. We have to help people get there from here. And so, I think one of the problems with some of my colleagues is they sort of act like the foodie elite. And I've jokingly compared them to Marie Antoinette. In the French Revolution, supposedly when the peasants didn't have bread, Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake. Well, you can sort of compare that to the modern day foodie elite, where we could say, the peasants don't have broccoli, and the response is, well, let them eat kale. It doesn't really help anybody. So what we need to do is sort of go where the people are. We have a nutrition guidance system we developed called NuVal. 1 to 100, the higher the number, the more nutritious the food. It's been validated against health outcomes. The higher the NuVal scores of your food, the lower your risk of premature death from any cause, the lower your risk of chronic disease. It's very powerful. But the idea here is, people in the real world do eat food that comes in bags, boxes, bottles, jars, and cans. Frankly, so do I. Breakfast cereal and breads and such, pasta sauces and salad dressings. And the choices you make there can add up to matter enormously to the quality of your diet and your health. So I think we can help people by engineering our way toward the solution we really want, which is all the right kinds of foods. But to get from here to there, I think at times meal replacements can be helpful. I think at times conveniently packaged foods that are nutrient dense can be helpful. And I think a guidance system to help people trade up their chips, their crackers, their breakfast cereals, their pasta sauces, their yogurts, I think that can be really helpful as well. So again, I'm a public health pragmatist. I can envision the ideal, but I'm not inclined to make perfect the enemy of good. I want to do good in the real world.
Absolutely. So one more thing while we're on nutrients before we get on to the other 4 areas. I know with nutrients, the first time I heard you speak at Yale in 2008, you spoke about CoQ10 and sort of the depletion of statins. Drugs as a depleter of nutrients, is this a serious issue in your estimation?
Well, it is, and certainly that's a very well-established association. There are others. It's hard to tell whether the reduction in CoQ10 levels seen with statin use are affecting people's health adversely in general. One of the issues we've seen with statin use is that in women in particular, there's an increased risk of diabetes. I don't think we know for sure exactly what the mechanism is yet. And does that have something to do with the depletion of enzymes or cofactors or nutrients such as CoQ10? CoQ10 is a really important compound. It functions in the mitochondria, which are the engine of the cell. I mean, that's really where we produce our energy. So it's just a critical element in cell biology. And what CoQ10 does there is facilitate the transport of electrons. That's just the key step in how cells make their energy and run the body. So you certainly don't want to run out of CoQ10, and it's very, very well established that statin use depletes CoQ10. In some cases, in my experience, James, the muscle pain that can occur with statin use goes away when you supplement CoQ10. So, sometimes the answer is, well, you really do need the drug, and it is affecting a nutrient level in your body, and the right response is to supplement the nutrients. So it's an important issue. This is one specific example. There are others. The bigger issue, I think, is that, if we look from altitude, we have a culture that needs a lot of drugs. I mean, we have a lot of high cholesterol and high blood pressure and coronary disease and diabetes. And once you have all that stuff, well, then, frankly, you really do need drugs. And very often, and I'm an internist, I prescribe medication, and very often those drugs keep people alive. It's quite clear, for example, that when you look at overall statin use in appropriate patients, statins are associated with a reduction in all-cause mortality. They are saving lives. So then you say, okay, well, there are these adverse effects of the drugs, but once you need the drug, you're better off taking it because taking the drug is better for you than not taking it. The real problem then is that so many of us need the drugs in the first place. And if we use lifestyle as medicine, we wouldn't. So the better way is not, hey, I need a drug, but I'm not going to take it because I don't like them. No, that's a mistake. You know that the rate of stroke in the United States has come down dramatically in recent decades, James. And the reason for that, is not because we're taking much better care of ourselves. The reason for that is better detection and treatment of hypertension, the use of really good drugs. But again, if we did take better care of ourselves, we wouldn't need the drugs. And then you don't have to worry about side effects or nutrient depletion. So, for now, I would say if you've got diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, any of these things, be open-minded about medication use. Work with your doctor, discuss with your doctor, ask about nutrients, nutrient depletion, should you take a supplement. And I customize those recommendations for my patients. There's no one-size-fits-all correct answer. But as a culture, what we could say is if I don't yet have those conditions, how can we make better use of lifestyle as medicine so I'm less likely ever to need medication? So my kids are less likely ever to need medication. I'm 51 years old. I've got 5 kids in a desk job, and I'm right in the age group of my patients who are routinely being prescribed lots of medications. I take none. My blood pressure is perfect. My lipids are perfect. There's just nothing on the horizon to suggest I'm going to need any of the medications I prescribe all the time. And again, not because I'm a better person. but because I'm an expert in healthful living, I apply that to myself as medicine, and these are the rewards of it.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and one other thing, the last word I would just say on forks you had is that one of the strategies, if you're eating food that doesn't require a fork, that is probably not the right food, right? Like something that's housed in a couple of buns or something like that.
Well, it depends. Again, you could put some pretty wholesome stuff on, whole grain. I'm not opposed to grains. I'm not gluten intolerant, and so, I'm fine with whole grain wheat, and we eat a variety of grains in my house. My wife does wonderful things with bulgur wheat, which is a mainstay in many of the Mediterranean diets. We eat quinoa routinely. We actually occasionally have amaranth. We have wild rice, just a wide variety. They're rich in a variety of nutrients, fiber, so I like them. And honestly, I like bread. My wife is French. Give me a great whole grain bread and good bit of goat cheese and a great red wine. That's a great treat. Now, I wouldn't eat that for health every day, but I'm not going to take it off my menu entirely either, because we were just discussing a little bit ago, pleasure is important too, and that can be a very pleasurable thing. So, I think there's a balance to be struck. But yes, in general, what we can say about the best foods is that they've got a very short ingredient list. Yeah. And the best foods of all have an ingredient list of just one word. The ingredients in broccoli are broccoli, and walnuts are walnuts, and salmon it's salmon, and bananas are bananas. That's sort of what we're aiming for. And then, they tend to come in less involved packaging. A lot of the best foods, they just kind of come to you, right from nature. The packaging is appeal as opposed to a box. But you can get some pretty good stuff in a box or a bag as well. And, again, I think there's a balance to be struck.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a great last word on food, because this is such a big controversy, and it will continue to be like that. But I think it's just important to just get really clear where the leverage is, and I think you've been very clear on that. So let's go on to the next one. You said fingers. Do you want to just sort of take us through, just from a Masters of Public Health or Public Health stage, how important the fingers are when it comes to longevity?
So we're referring there to holding cigarettes. It's tobacco. Since 1993, we've had a literature telling us what the root causes of premature death are. So, we used to think that the leading causes of death were the diseases that show up on death certificates: heart disease, cancer, stroke, respiratory diseases, diabetes, and so on. But in 1993, there was a publication called Actual Causes of Death in the United States that looked beyond that to the factors that cause those diseases that in turn cause the premature deaths. And in that paper, Actual Causes of Death in the United States, published in JAMA in 1993, the number one leading cause of premature death in the U.S. was tobacco. And it still probably is, but the gap between tobacco as number one and the combination of bad use of feet and forks, not being active enough and eating badly, has narrowed quite a bit. And it may very well be that bad use of feet and forks is now number one, for two reasons, one good, one bad. The good reason is we smoke a lot less than we used to, and the bad is, we haven't made the progress we need with regard to physical activity and diet. But it's really that simple. If you are exposed at fairly high levels in your population to tobacco, it quickly becomes the leading cause of premature death, and that's not really the worst of it. Dying prematurely is bad enough. But, people who die from conditions induced by tobacco don't die quickly for the most part. They die slowly. It's a miserable death. Things like emphysema and lung cancer and COPD, they're really, really unpleasant. And before they take years from your life, they take life out of your years. So I don't think we can overstate the significance of tobacco as a scourge in the world. I would like to see it banished to the dustbin of history. It proves to have been a humongous mistake, and it needs to go away. That's all there is to it. Unlike food, which is complicated. Food can do us harm, of course, when we make bad choices, but it's critical to life. We can't reject it. We have to make it work for us. We can reject tobacco completely. It's just it was a huge boondoggle. It's just a historical tragedy. It needs to go away. We need to look past it. I love the movie Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, but the one thing I didn't like in the movie, because it's this presumably distant future we're in, was that one of the scientists in the movie Smokes, and I thought, I don't even believe that would be possible, to go that far into the future and still have that stuff around. I think it'll be long gone by then.
Yeah, no, I think you might be right. All right, so let's look at the other three areas, because those three that you've just mentioned are typically, sort of public health 101, right? And now we're getting into some maybe other areas that you mentioned earlier, the stress and love and other things like that. Do you want to just talk on why this has become part of your sort of recommendation list now?
The evidence is really very strong about sleep, that it has profound influences on health, including those aspects of health that tend to be the modern preoccupation. So, for example, weight control. Sleep deprivation is commonly a factor in difficulty with weight control, both because it's hard to eat in a thoughtful, restrained way when you're tired and cranky, but also because when your sleep pattern's disrupted, it disrupts hormonal balance, which in turn directly conspires against weight control and helps put calories right where you don't want them to go, around your middle where they do the most harm, that sort of thing. And there's a pretty comparable body of information regarding stress, both as a factor in adverse health outcomes and as something that conspires against weight, because then you wind up eating to relieve the stress, and sort of food becomes the medicine and so forth. But also evidence that, other things being equal, stress can increase the likelihood of and the progression of heart disease, cancer, diabetes. People who are overwhelmed by stress don't recover from chronic disease when they get it. The evidence is really very strong. And then finally, it's equally strong for what can be summarized as love, and what that really refers to. It's not specifically romantic love, although that's a wonderful thing, but just strong social connections. John Donne told us centuries ago, "No man is an island." It's still true. We are social creatures, men, women, and children alike. We need one another. And if you're isolated and lonely, it conspires against your health. You're less resilient. When you need help, of course, there aren't the people to provide it, but there just isn't that emotional support that needs to be part of our existence every day. We just don't thrive in isolation. We thrive as part of a tribe. So the evidence is strong for all of these. And from my perspective, and certainly writing Disease Proof, the issue was we need to look at health holistically. It's either intact or it's not. And the interesting thing is that any one of these can conspire against the others. So imagine you're just lonely. Well, then the motivation to exercise or eat well starts to go away, and so you don't do those, and then you gain weight, and you start to get unhealthy, and then because you're unhealthy, it's hard to get out and do anything, so you become more isolated and more lonely, and you start to go down the tubes. If your problem is sleep, you're just exhausted all the time, so you don't have the energy or the motivation to eat well or exercise, so you don't do those, and you start to gain weight, and then because you gain weight, you have sleep apnea, so you sleep less and become more exhausted and crankier and eat more poorly and exercise even less, and down the tubes you go. The other thing that we could add to this mix is chronic pain. Very, very common problem, because one of the chronic diseases that plagues modern society is arthritis. So you may have joint pain, which makes it hard to exercise, which makes you gain weight, which then may interfere with your sleep. So now you're exhausted, making it even harder to exercise. So you gain more weight, so your arthritis gets worse, and on it goes. So the only way to fix all of these things really is to look at all of them together and think holistically. We have a whole section in Disease Proof on sizing yourself up holistically, and then you can reverse engineer this. So, for example, pick a typical patient in my practice who's maybe in their 60s, has obesity, and maybe type 2 diabetes, but, certainly insulin resistance, and their lipids are abnormal, and their blood pressure's high, and they have arthritis, and they're chronic pain, and they don't sleep well, and they don't eat well, and they don't exercise. And when you talk about any one of these things, you get any of the others as an excuse. I'm too tired, I'm too lonely, I'm in pain, and on it goes. Well, what we try to do is say, okay, let's look at all of them and put them in a sequence and figure out which one of these do we need to focus on first. Maybe it's sleep, maybe it's pain. Let's try treating that. And then as soon as we get a little bit of benefit out of that treatment, we either improve your sleep by doing the right thing, or we improve your pain by treating it effectively. Our agreement then is we'll take what we gained and invest it back in you and work on the next thing. So if we improve your sleep, we'll then work on your pain, and we'll then work on exercise. If we improve your pain, we'll then work on your sleep, and then work on exercise, and then move on to diet. And so what was kind of this degenerating spiral down the tubes can become the very opposite. It can become a spiral staircase ascending step by step up to the health and vitality that everybody wants and everybody deserves. And that's the benefit, James, I think, of recognizing that, it's not just about diet and it's not just about physical activity. It is about feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. It's about our relationships. It is about whether or not we have pain in our lives that's interfering with exercise. You have to look at the whole picture. And again, the science is very strong on each one of these independently. But I think an equally important message is we've got to connect the dots, because we really can reverse engineer these processes that otherwise conspire against our health and vitality.
Yeah, and it seems like in a holistic paradigm, just improvement in any one of these sort of sends you more moving upwards and sort of like an upward spiral, versus any one of them, if there's a negative impact, as you said, it starts a negative spiral. So it's really about just trying to find one of them to kickstart you in an upward direction, and then you see the progress in all of them, probably, right?
All the time. It's a very, very powerful process and extremely gratifying for doctor and patient alike. So in my clinic, I'm directly involved in this, but I also think people can do this on their own, just by getting the right perspective. And so that, the point of this whole section in Disease Proof was to empower people to address this on their own. Whether or not there's a doctor involved, look at yourself holistically, kind of get a handle on, what is it that makes it so hard for me to eat well? Can I focus right away on diet, or are there other things I need to think about first? Frankly, if you've got a toxic relationship, a marriage that's dysfunctional, or if you hate your job, or that may be the thing that needs attention first. So, again, looking at the big picture, really, really important. And those key elements in the big picture often are feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. But again, it has to be customized, and we need to be honest with ourselves, identify the priorities in our lives. And then remember that, making your life good is what this is really all about. And so, relationships and job and career and all of those things figure in it. That's part of health too.
So which people in medicine, because this whole conference is on the evolution of medicine, and what we're really interested in is, seeing the way that medicine is evolving. Who in medicine, or who outside of medicine, is in the best position to kickstart this upward spiral?
Well, again, what we've been talking about for most of this hour, James, is lifestyle as medicine. I'm the president now of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. That's really where my passion resides. And what that means, if lifestyle is the medicine, then the doctor is you. And so, frankly, every one of us, and we were agreeing before that if you want to change the world, it starts by changing ourselves, because when enough of us buy better food, then the food supply improves, that sort of thing. I think that's true of medicine as well. If we want to be treated holistically as patients, I think we need to start looking at ourselves holistically and acknowledging that our relationships matter, and that whether or not you're satisfied with your work and your career is important, and cultivating love and friendship in your life is important, and prioritizing sleep. I think it can begin with every one of us. I think there is a revolution in medicine. I think medicine should be more holistic, more integrated, emphasize lifestyle, should be more about cultivating health than just treating disease. And, we could talk about different specialists who could have a hand in that. Maybe it's the pediatricians because they're taking care of kids. Maybe it's the cardiologist or the endocrinologist. I don't really see it that way. I think, again, the best medicine is lifestyle. And the spoon for that kind of medicine isn't so much the clinic as culture. And each of us is the patient, but each of us can be the doctor as well. We can administer this to ourselves. So I think it's simply a matter of opening up our eyes, recognizing that we have substantial control over our medical destinies, committing to be responsible, sensible, to acquire skills, that there isn't magical pixie dust. We need to think about health a little bit more like wealth. Something that you invest in, nurture, cultivate, share with the people you love, bequeath to your children. You raise children who aspire to it. We could have all of that if we just change the way we think and then change the way we act. So, I see the best and brightest future in medicine pertaining to how we function as patients, frankly.
And is that one of the reasons why you sort of take such good care of yourself? Because I definitely see that people don't really like to be told what to do, but they do sort of look to models or examples of people that have done it and sort of look to copy them. But, everyone has an opinion, even if you're the head of public health and people just don't generally like to be told what to do. So it seems like the knock-on effect of actually doing this in your community and doing it for yourself and letting everyone else in your community see that you've taken this responsibility rather than sort of preaching is going to be a better strategy for taking this message outwards.
I think so. I don't like being told what to do, but I don't mind being told what's what. Knowledge is power. I like to have the truth. So much of my focus is simply telling people what's what. But, I think, frankly, the issue here is one of empowerment. And I also think we want to take the moral overtones out of the discussion. One of the problems with discussions about health is it feels like I'm being told what to do. Someone's wagging their finger at me and telling me lose weight, lower your cholesterol. And that's why I routinely discuss with my patients what health is for. They come to me, we're talking about these things, and I say, by the way, what is this all for? Well, I want to be healthy, I don't want to, but why? Well, the answer to all of that is to have a better life. So this isn't for me. It's not because you should. It's because healthy people have more fun, and who could object to that? So then, and after that, when you agree on that, then it's not about being told what to do. It's just, yes, I want that. Now let's talk about how best to get there from here.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things why, I'm really excited about the functional medicine model is that it allows to have more time at the beginning of the conversation to be able to find that why for the patient that's sitting in front of you. Everyone has a different why. For some people, it's they want to be, if they're older, they want to be able to play with their grandkids. For some people, it's, like exactly what you're saying, to have a better life. But it seems like uncovering that why on a case-by-case basis is an important role in medicine.
I couldn't agree more. And again, James, I think it's a role the doctor can participate in, but it's also something we each basically do for ourselves. I mean, what is it I want in my life? But whatever the answer is, whether it's time with your grandkids or you love to golf or you love to ski or whatever, you're going to be able to do more of it and do it for longer if you're healthy than if you're sick. It's just that simple. So I think, all of us would prefer to be healthy than sick. What we get out of being healthy is very individualized. But the prize for each of us is having more of the life we want to have. And again, it's out there for us. There's just this huge opportunity. 80% of all chronic disease could go away if we turned what we have long known into what we routinely do. And until that day dawns, I'm going to keep doing what I do because I really would like to see it happen.
Absolutely. And one other area that's just where medicine is evolving is this move from sort of analog to digital. And we could definitely be looking at a time in the very near future where everyone has an iWatch, and the iWatch is, keeping track of 100 different health numbers, and patients are getting this information in various forms through different apps. What do you think is the promise or the potential of that digital revolution for getting that information, for empowerment in these areas?
Well, again, I think we've engineered our way into this mess with highly processed food and labor-saving technology. I think to some extent we have to engineer our way out. And, we have evidence that some of the very things that are part of the problem, like video games that encourage kids to be sedentary, can be converted into part of the solution because we make them invite physical activity. Similarly, a lot of the things that modern living invites people to neglect, like, moving their feet, technology reminds them not to neglect, like counting their steps and tracking their activity and so forth. At the end of the day, again, you look at blue zones and places where people just live well, they tend not to be highly technology dependent. But to some extent, the horse has left the barn. We are in a highly technologized world, and now it can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. So I think it can be a significant part of the solution, and I think it will be.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. So, Doc, you're probably more qualified than almost anyone on this summit to talk about sort of this evolution of medicine from a public health point of view. I really appreciate all the things that you shared today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share when you really think about the evolution of medicine and sort of your role in it as it has been and your role moving forward? Is there something about the evolution of medicine particularly that you'd like to share?
Well, I suppose the final comment here, James, is we don't really have a choice. We need a revolution. Right now in the United States, the Centers for Disease Control is projecting that should current trends persist, by about the middle of this century, 1 in 3 American adults will be diabetic. That's over 100 million people. We're having trouble paying the bills right now, and there are only 27 million diagnosed diabetics in the U.S. 100 million is just not, it's not sustainable. I don't think the country can be solvent. So, whatever the mission we're involved in related to health, frankly, we find ourselves on the front lines of nothing less than homeland security. So unless we have this revolution in medicine where lifestyle becomes the medicine, where it's more about prevention and less about treatment, we are going to bequeath to our children an absolutely unsustainable burden. So yes, there are elements of evolution that we clearly need in medicine, but frankly, we need a revolution, and we need it pretty darn soon. And the good news is we have all the knowledge we need. We should have all the passion we need because this is affecting people we love. This is not a job where we need new Nobel Prizes to figure out how to get it done. We know how to do it. We just have lacked the resolve to get it done, to make culture the medium and lifestyle the medicine, to get the job done. We really aren't going to have much choice. It's a bit like climate change. We've sort of reached a point where the consequences of failing to act are simply too great. And, it's unfortunate to have to get pushed up against the wall before you take action. But, when you are pushed up against the wall, you're out of choices. We're kind of out of choices. So, I think whether we call it evolution or it's a bit more abrupt than that and it's revolution, I think this basic change in the character of medicine is inevitable because I don't think we have options. I think we have to do this. And the good news is we will all be beneficiaries of it.
Absolutely. And the way that you see these things going down generations, it's not just doing it to ourselves, but, you have 5 kids, I have kids too. And I think that if you look at it from that point of view, there's definitely something that needs to be paid. And the last thing I would say is there's a great quote that I saw yesterday is, may you never know what you prevented. I think part of this is that there's, it's a lot easier to be reactive to something that's obviously a big problem, like you have a disease. With preventative medicine, we really have to put that to the forefront so that everyone can see the value in it. And I think you've shared that so eloquently today. This has been The Evolution of Medicine. Dr. David Katz, I really appreciate you taking time to be on the summit. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing through the different organizations that you work with, and also through the internet to get this word out there. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you here on the summit, and that I hope that the ripple effects of this summit go some way towards what you've been espousing today. And we look forward to continuing to watch your career, and who knows where it might take you as far as being able to pull the levers to make some of this change. But it's been great to have you here today, and we'll look forward to hopefully communicating more in the future.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's been my pleasure, and I appreciate the help in getting the word out. So my thanks to you.
All right. Thank you. So this has been the Evolution of Medicine Summit. Lots of great other speakers today and all the way through the week. This has been Dr. David Katz, and we'll see you next time.